There are moments in life when God calls us out of our comfort zone and into a place of courage. Good morning. I'd like to welcome you into our devotion time, and we live in a season just like that right now. If you remember in the book of Esther, we find one of the greatest pictures of this truth. I want to kind of talk about that this morning. Esther was a young Jewish woman who became queen, and she stood in a moment of history where silence would have been easier for her, but obedience was necessary through her. See, Mordecai was her cousin, but also a spiritual mentor. And this is what he warned her very plainly. Found in Esther chapter 4, verses 13 and 14, he says, "Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether hold thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed." Now listen to this. "And who knows whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" These words this morning remind us that the season we live in is a call for action, not complacency. I want to repeat that again this morning. It's a call to action, not complacency. God's plan is never going to fail. That's a truth. He will rise up deliverance even if we fail to act. But what a tragedy it'll be to miss the very reason we were created and the very calling we were born to fulfill in this season of our lives. Esther could have chosen silence, believing her royal position would shield her from danger. But Mordecai stripped away that false security by telling her, "Don't think that you're going to escape." And just in the same way, as I read that this morning, we are sometimes tempted to think that if we stay quiet and blend in, that'll somehow keep us safe in a culture that opposes the ways of God. But becoming neutral is never neutral at all. What it is, it's really just a silent agreement with the forces of evil. I want you to really dissect that this morning and release it into your life for what it really is, because God is calling the church to action right now. And if you think that becoming neutral is okay, it's not, because neutral is not a position when it comes to the Lord's work. It's really just a silent agreement with the forces of evil. See, the world does not need a silent church. It needs a courageous church. We can't afford to hide behind our walls of comfort and convenience and fear. The kingdom of God has always advanced when His people spoke truth, even when it cost them everything. Mordecai's words were not only a warning, but also a calling. Listen to what he said. "Who knows whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Those words, they still echo down through the centuries to all of us today. We are alive in this very moment, in this very generation, by God's design, not ours. You and I were not randomly placed here. We were positioned here. The Bible tells us in Psalm chapter 1, we were planted for a purpose. And if you're wondering how to stand against so much division, then you can find clarity in the bold statement that Peter and the apostles gave even in the midst of persecution. Acts chapter 5, verse number 29, when it says, "We ought to obey God rather than man." Obedience to God, that's our foundation. It may not always align with the opinions of other people. As a matter of fact, most of the time it won't. Won't always align with the pressures of society. Won't always align with other people's agenda. And we know there's plenty of those. It won't even align with some of our own comfort zones, if we're honest. But here's the truth, church. Obedience always positions us on the path of God's power and God's purpose. See, both Esther and the apostles, they faced life-threatening risk just because of their obedience. Esther risked her life before the king's throne, and Peter risked his life before earthly rulers. Yet both knew that silence and compromise would be far more costly for them than standing for truth. So when the church chooses courage over comfort, that's when God releases his mighty power the most. So we're seeing that right now in this season in which we live. When we step into full obedience, God can then reveal the reason he placed us here for such a time as this. It's not about being political. It's not about all the different sides that people are on. It has nothing to do with that. That's a smoke and mirror tactic by the enemy. What it is, every single thing we see going on in the world right now is spiritual. And we have to look at it through spiritual eyesight. We have to hear it through spiritual ears. And we have to speak with spiritual truth. Our world is in a critical hour. Families are fractured. Truth is blurred. Darkness pushes hard against the light of God's saving grace through his Son, Jesus Christ. This is not the season to be passive. This is the season to rise, to speak, to stand, and to shine. We may never stand in a palace like Esther, but you have a platform in your home, in your workplace, in your community. And I'm here to tell you this morning, your influence matters. And God has placed you there for a very specific purpose. Not to voice your opinions. Make sure you understand that. We all need to understand that. God never called us to voice our opinions. He called us to declare his truth. The question is not whether God will bring deliverance. He always has, and he always will. The question is really whether you and I take place in his plan. Will we obey God rather than men? Will we rise with courage or sink back in silence? Like Esther, we stand at a crossroads of a choice. And like the apostles, we must decide whom we will obey. The world may pressure us to step back, sit down, and be quiet. But the Spirit of God calls us to move forward with boldness and with power and with authority. This is our moment. This is our season. And this is our time. And yes, we were born for such a time as this. Today you be safe, you be strong, and you be blessed. And you stand for what you know is truth. Lord's will, we'll see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great day.